The sun was blazing overhead the first time I noticed her, lying on the faded striped beach chair behind the fence that separated our yards. I was sweating, soaked through my shirt, struggling to finish repainting the wooden shed my late father had built years before. My hands were rough, my posture bent, and my heart worn from months of life feeling heavier than I knew how to carry. Meanwhile, she lay there like the day itself admired her, sun-kissed, calm, untouched by worry. I remember pausing, brush mid-stroke, watching how she seemed to belong to a world of ease I had never been part of. She lifted her sunglasses and caught me staring. Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile, the kind someone gives when they see the storm in you. In that moment, I didn't know she would change everything. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that sometimes people are placed in our lives for a reason, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Power of Kindness to help this message reach more hearts. Her name was Karina. I learned that later, after days watching her come out to sunbathe around the same time I would try and force myself to work on things around the property. I had inherited the house after my father passed, and though people said I should have been grateful, it felt more like a weight pressing against my chest. I'd moved back home to take care of him in his final months, and after he was gone, I remained there physically, while emotionally I drifted in place like a boat that had lost its anchor. Karina lived next door with her aunt, though it seemed more accurate to say she took care of her aunt rather than the other way around. Her aunt was older, quiet, and rarely left the house. I would sometimes see Karina bringing groceries in, adjusting a wheelchair ramp, or trimming the flowers along the walkway. It was clear she had her own burdens, even if she didn't wear them visibly. But on those summer afternoons, when she lay out under the warm light with her eyes closed, she looked so peaceful that even the wind seemed to slow down for her. One day, as I worked, she shifted on her chair and called over the fence. "Hey, could you help me for a second?" Her voice was soft, friendly, like she had always known me. I set down the paintbrush, wiped my hands on my jeans, and walked closer. She held up a bottle of sunscreen, glancing over her shoulder. "Mind putting some on my back? I can't reach, and my aunt's taking her nap." I hesitated. I must have looked awkward or uncertain, because she laughed lightly. Not mocking, just warm. I walked around the fence and stood behind her. Her back was smooth and freckled, warm from the sun. As I gently rubbed the lotion across her skin, she closed her eyes again and exhaled. "You always work so hard," she said quietly. "Do you ever take a break?" I didn't know how to answer, so I didn't. She became a part of my days after that. Not all at once, more like the way water seeps into soil. We chatted sometimes. She would tell me small things about her aunt, about the summer, about how she used to teach swim lessons to kids at the community pool. I would tell her almost nothing about myself, because I didn't think I had anything worth saying. But she listened anyway, as though my quiet had meaning. 2.1 afternoon, she asked if I wanted lemonade. I followed her to her backyard patio, where we sat under the shade of a large maple. The lemonade was cold, and the quiet was gentle. She reached out and touched a smear of paint still stuck on my forearm. "You do good work," she said. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt seen, not as someone who was struggling, but as someone who was trying. As days passed, I noticed details about her. How she hummed under her breath without noticing. How she always checked the position of the sun before moving her aunt's wheelchair to the window so she could enjoy the light. How she sometimes stared off at nothing with a sadness so deep it seemed part of her breath. One evening, I finally asked her how long she had lived there. Her expression changed, softened with memory. She told me her aunt had raised her from the age of 5 after her parents were lost in an accident. She said her aunt had always been her safe place, the person who held her through loss and helped her grow. But now it was her turn to take care of the woman who once saved her. "Love," she said quietly, "goes both ways. Even when it hurts." Her words stayed with me. They wrapped around the grief I carried for my father, grief I had never let myself feel fully. I realized I had been working and sweating and fixing things not to maintain the house, but to avoid sitting with my pain. One day, while I was redoing a section of the fence, my hands began to shake. I had pushed myself too hard, the same way I always did. I leaned against the fence, breathing heavy. Karina was sunbathing again, but this time she sat up and watched me. After a moment, she stood, walked to me, and without asking, placed her hand over mine. "You don't have to hold everything alone," she said. I didn't cry. Not then. But something inside me cracked open, just enough for light to seep in. Our connection grew in small, meaningful ways. She brought me tea on days I worked too long. I helped her trim her aunt's roses. We sat together in the evenings sometimes, saying nothing at all. And gradually, I started telling her about my father. About how he was quiet but strong. About how we didn't always understand each other, but how I loved him deeply. About how, at the end, I felt helpless. She listened with the same steady warmth she always had. When I finally cried, she didn't try to stop me. She just sat beside me, close enough that I could feel her presence like a hand on my back. Summer bloomed slowly into late season. The air grew softer. The sun set earlier. But she remained a constant light in my days. Then came the moment everything shifted. One afternoon, I heard a noise from her yard, something like a heavy thud. I rushed over to find her aunt had collapsed inside the house. Karina was panicking, trying to lift her. Together, we moved her gently and called for help. The hospital stay that followed was long and exhausting. I drove Karina back and forth, sat beside her in waiting rooms, made sure she ate. She cried once, just once, and she apologized for it as though she had done something wrong. I told her I understood. Her aunt passed quietly one morning, the light just beginning to enter the windows. Karina was holding her hand. After the funeral, she sat in her yard again, but not to sunbathe. She sat in the shade, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the grass. I sat down beside her. She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. We said nothing. Grief is a language of silence. Weeks passed, and autumn began to paint the trees. One afternoon, out of habit or memory or something deeper, Karina lay back on the old beach chair. She looked up at me and smiled, not the carefree smile she once had, but a softer, earned one. She picked up the sunscreen and held it out to me again. Mind putting some on my back, she asked. This time, the moment was different. This time, it felt like a beginning rather than a meeting. As I placed my hand on her back, she placed her hand on mine, just once, just enough to let me know she wasn't asking for help this time. She was asking me to stay out. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Power of Kindness. Your engagement helps more people receive stories that remind us of compassion, healing, and hope.